Look at these Nike shoes. They're made in Vietnam. And today, more than 50% of Nike shoes are made here in Vietnam. And only about 20% of Nike shoes now are made in China.
Check the shirt you're wearing right now. There's a pretty fair chance that it was made in Vietnam. Not made in China, but Vietnam. This country has been surging for manufacturing over the past couple years for a variety of reasons. But I'm here to understand if its economic growth is going to continue, and could it possibly become the next China?
Today, trade with Vietnam is surging with the US, while China's imports to the US is actually going down.
Made in Vietnam, Vietnam, India, made in China, made in Vietnam. It's kind of interesting because this is the same brand. This shirt I bought about 3 years ago, made in China. This I bought just a couple months ago, made in Vietnam.
GDP per capita in Vietnam is about $2,700. In China, it's nearly 4 times higher at about $10,000. China became the second largest economy in the world as a result of its trade with the US. But things are changing. The US imported 36% more in value from Vietnam in 2019 than the year before, importing $67 billion worth of stuff. In 2020, it continued to grow to nearly $80 billion. Okay, yes, that's still a fraction of imports from China, which was about $435 billion in 2020, but trade actually went down by almost 4% that same year. The same year it surged with Vietnam.
I've come to this fabrics market here in Ho Chi Minh City, and it's massive. I mean, you pick a random store, you walk inside, and then there's back alleys and more back alleys. There are so many of these stores.
China, 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 China.
President Trump waged a trade war against China in 2018, basically accusing China of making its currency value low so it would be competitive for companies to do business with. And as a result of this, Trump added tariffs to almost $500 billion worth of goods.
Because of the trade war, a lot of companies got nervous. They said, maybe China is not the best place to do business. What if things change? What if tension rises? What if there are sanctions? What if the cost of doing business here doubles, triples, quadruples over the next few years? So they got worried and said, we need an alternative. We need another place where we can manufacture. And Vietnam became the place to do that. Vietnam has a pretty good relationship with the US, and its currency is stable, mostly staying consistent to the US dollar over the past 10 years. Vietnam is very close to China, of course. Prices of labor are cheaper than China, and it's a stable economy, it's a stable government.
Vietnam has truly become one of the great miracles of the world.
Vietnam is considered to be an ally of the United States, even hosting President Trump's meeting with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. And there are a lot of disputes over the South China Sea, which China says it owns, but Vietnam and the US push back on that.
Vietnam benefited from that tariff war because it saw an opportunity to take some of the business that was going into China for manufacturing. And of course, companies liked it. So why wouldn't companies try and offset some of their reliance on China here in Vietnam?
So there are a few reasons that things are shifting. Rising costs in China, the uncertainty over that trade war, but there's also a third: COVID. China's borders are closed and lockdowns are still happening in 2022, while Vietnam has reopened its borders.
While most economies were extremely challenged during the pandemic, here in Vietnam, their economy was growing by a lot. So in 2020, when things were really scary for many countries and companies, Vietnam actually saw a trade surplus with the US. There was a 25% surge in trade that the US and Vietnam were doing together. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, my name is Uptin. Make sure you follow and subscribe for more.
Last year, more than half of all Nike shoes were made in Vietnam.
Vietnam has become a big exporter of furniture, computers, electronics, and apparel.
Today, Vietnam is considered the main country for manufacturing for Adidas and Nike.
This textile market is never ending. Everywhere I look, it's just more and more and more. But some economists say not so fast. Vietnam cannot become the next China, and here are 2 reasons why.
China's population is 1.4 billion people versus Vietnam's 95 million. So Vietnam will never be able to truly fill in China's shoes for world demand. And the other reason is that China has been building infrastructure for decades now. In Vietnam, not so much. Highways and factories are getting big investments now, but China's had a huge lead on that. But as companies are increasingly moving into Vietnam, it's also raising the living standard for millions of people here. In fact, while the US struggles from a decline declining middle class, Vietnam is seeing millions more enter the middle class. Over the past few decades, Vietnam went from one of the poorest countries in the world to a fast-growing middle-income economy. Just look at this luxury mall I find in Ho Chi Minh City, with every luxury retailer you can imagine.
A lot of my friends back in the US, when they think about Vietnam, they think of manufacturing, they think of farms. They would be really surprised to see a luxury mall like this with a lot of designer stores.
And then there are the massive new building projects that I see, many of them advertising for the luxury life.
What's up, guys? Thanks for watching this video. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Does Vietnam have the potential to become the next China? While you're at it, check out more of my videos here in Vietnam and around the world, and I'll see you soon.